Hi everyone, my name is Frida and I'm an astrologer, psychologist, and I specialize in practical personal astrology and also merging astrology with psychology. What I'm going to do in today's video is looking at mundane astrology, which means I will be looking more at what's going on right now and perhaps give a few insights and a few pieces of advice in regards to how we can navigate through these energies. Because energies are quite intense right now. I don't know if people feel the same as me, but I feel it's quite intense. And this is partly because we are we are in the eclipse corridor and we're going to have an eclipse on the 25th of March. But it's also because the sun will actually ingress into the sign of Aries tomorrow, 20th of March, which marks the start of a new cycle, a new astrological year. So we're going to look at two charts today, the chart for the sun's ingress into Aries and what we can say about that, and also look at the chart for the eclipse, which is basically a full moon. We have a lunar eclipse, which is a full moon, but what also is like a full moon on steroids, basically. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see the charts, and I will try to do this as practical as possible. Because as you all know, astrology is a huge, vast, very complicated subject. So what I try to do is bring it down into practical terms in true Torah style, and perhaps just give a few insights so you can navigate in these energies in more, with more ease and more flow, and also with increased authenticity. So having said that, I'm not going to complicate it and I'm not going to repeat myself either. Let's start looking at some charts. And for that, I will share my screen now here and we will open it up. So what I'm doing here right now is that I have actually, calculated the chart for the sun's ingress in the sign to the sign of Aries. And you will see my marker here is the sun at 0000 degrees of Aries. What's important to say here is that this is the beginning of a new cycle. And as for all new beginnings, the energy that we enter with is quite important. We have recently passed through the whole zodiac, and we have recently had the sun moving through the sign of Pisces, which is the archetype of the, I would say, the wise Buddha type that just is one with the universe, one with everything. It's Pisces also comes with the key phrase of I believe. And now we're transitioning from I believe to Aries and the key phrase of I am. It's like we're being reborn here because the 12th zodiac sign Pisces, like I said, is the old Buddha. And now Aries is like a newborn baby. Basically. Aries is very headstrong. It's the archetype that is very initiating. Ignites things. It's ruled by Mars, so we have a lot of energy here, basically. I'm not going to dig too deep into this chart, but I just wanted to let you all know that it's a huge new beginning, basically. And also, what is interesting here in terms of aspects, relationships to other planets or points, is that the sun at 00 degrees here of Aries is making here a sextile, which is a favorable aspect. It's like a flirt. It's like it can create good results, so to speak. But it's needed to, just as we have a fling or a flirt, something is needed for all good aspects. We need to work. We cannot just expect astrology to do the work for us, right? What's important to know here is that there is potential here, since we have the sun in Aries in sextile aspect to Pluto in Aquarius. And why I bring this up is because there's a lot of talk going on around Pluto and Pluto's ingress into Aquarius, because that was a huge shift. And we are experiencing a huge shift on a collective level. Because last time Pluto was in Aquarius was in the late 1700s, 1777 till 1799. And I mean, it was very transformative in the world in those times. For example, we had the Enlightenment period, the end of the Enlightenment period. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we had huge transformative shifts, such as the state breaking free from the church and so on, like paving the way for more liberation, Aquarius, and also a greater focus on individuality to a larger extent. And those are characteristics that are very tied to the archetype of Aquarius. So the sextile here between the sun in Aries, which is initiation of something new on a conscious level, sun, with Pluto ruling the underworld, transformation, growth, and the masses. Pluto rules the masses. We tend to forget that sometimes. We tend to forget that Pluto is the most slow-moving planet we have, and it rules like huge, slow processes of transformations. Like we can never go back to how it was before, because the transformation brought by Pluto is so deep and so yeah, it's really so transformative. So that's important to say. So the fact that we have a connection here between the sun, one of the luminaries, the conscious luminary, and Pluto here, which is also if you look at it from that point of view, it's also actually an applying aspect. An applying aspect meaning that the sun is approaching, because the sun moves faster than Pluto. So the sun is approaching Pluto, and there will be an exact sextile in the upcoming days. So that's important. So what that means also with an applying aspect between the sun and Pluto is that we can expect some kind of anticipation here. If we would have had a separating aspect, meaning, for example, that the sun was past an exact sextile, it was, for example, at 2-3 degrees of Aries, and we had an important, or we had a Pluto at late Capricorn degree at the sun's ingress of Aries, a separating aspect, that would more bring some sort of ending or so. But this is like anticipation, something new is coming, and that also shows by the early degrees of Pluto in Aquarius, something new is coming. So what is coming then? Well, we're going to get to that also when we look at the eclipse chart. But what I sense and what I have felt and seen and received also from my intuitive guidance is basically that, I mean, there are going to be new structures, the old structures, because before Pluto in Aquarius, we had Pluto in Capricorn, right? Capricorn ruling the structures. Capricorn is also ruled by Saturn, which is equivalent for structures and that this kind of more rigid approach. I mean, we're moving away from that and we're going into this power to the people era. We're going into an era where I think there will be huge changes in terms of how we look at, for example, science, how we look at what does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be a collective? What does it mean to be enlightened even, you know, those kind of themes, because the archetype of Aquarius stands for knowing. Many people think that it's related to water because it looks like to water waves, but actually not. It's related to air, thinking, communication, and it's actually the third stage of thinking. So it's thinking and communication and higher learning and higher knowledge on a collective level. And what is important there also is that there is individuality tied to Aquarius, but there's also a great sense of collectiveness, like bringing us all together. What does that mean to be a collective together? Since it is the third air sign, and like I said, It marks like an evolved state of communication or communication on a higher level, but it's also relating, since it's an air sign, relating in some sense to a group, the groups. What does it mean? What kind of groups do we belong to, and how do we progress? Progression is an important word for Aquarius, I believe. So transformation through progression, we could say, which is flirting with this new cycle that is beginning this year. Very, very transformative. Worth mentioning here also is that we have some things going on here in Aries as well, right? We have the North Node, and we will come to this on the next chart. But as you can see, the North Node is very close in conjunction here, 2 degrees apart, with a conjunction almost exact. It's an applying aspect as well. It's going to get tighter. It's anticipation here as well. With Chiron, the wounded healer. So what this brings to my mind is basically also that what we're ingressing into, this power, this era of progression through transformation and liberation, it also brings out some kind of theme related to healing the self, because healing is equivalent for Chiron, and the self, we can tie the self to the archetype of Aries, because with the key phrase I am. So there's some kind of thing going on here with healing the self. And here we can even lift it up to the collective level again and say that, okay, how do we heal the collective self? Because there's one thing on an individual level, right? Healing each and every one of us and finding our individual identities in this society that we're building and the society that is progressing. But how do we manage to somehow heal the collective self? That's a very interesting question, and it's somehow tied to communication or daring to also be a little bit confrontative to some extent, or saying what we are, like defining what we are. That could be one thing, defining what we are, and let also communicate more actively, perhaps through actions, because Aries is also a sign that is quite action oriented, since it is a fire sign, and it's the first sign of the zodiac, and it's also a sign that is ruled by Mars. So we have that connection with, like, okay, like, are your actions aligned with what you preach? And I think that's really, really important. And I think that's also something that goes the other way around. Can you walk the talk, but can you talk the walk? If you know what I mean. It's very important. So that was a few things I wanted to mention here, and we're going to get into also a few other important planetary positions and what they mean. But this is what I wanted to bring out first, to just show that, okay, this is what we're starting with here this year, and the major theme here that I can see. And of course, with astrology, we can always break it down into like meticulous details, and we can become very complicated in our understanding. But I'm not going to do that this time, because I'm going to try to keep it quite practical and say that we're on the verge of a great transformation. The upcoming 2 decades, 20 years roughly, we will be experiencing Pluto in Aquarius. And this year in particular, with this sextile between the Sun and Pluto, as I mentioned here, there's going to be on a conscious level. Transformation is going to come up somehow on a conscious level with the Sun, and also, yeah, reach the masses, definitely. And it's also about healing the collective self, I believe. Let's move over to the other chart that I wanted to show here. Let's bring it like this. And let me drink something first also. So, a couple of days after the Sun has ingressed into Aries, we will experience a lunar eclipse. penumbral lunar eclipse. Some people say that penumbral lunar eclipse is a little bit less strong compared to other eclipses. I'm not going to go too much into that in this video. What I'm going to say, though, is that how do we see that this is an eclipse? Well, when we have a lunation, a full moon or a new moon, that is within 18 degrees of each side of either the moon or the lunation, basically. Within 18 degrees of the moon, the lunation. Then we have an eclipse. So this means that we have like ratio or whatever you say it, like it's possible for the if we have 18 degrees between either one of the lunar nodes and the lunation, we have an eclipse. Let me just say it like that so we don't complicate it too much. So we see here about roughly 10 degrees here between the south node and the moon in Libra. So this is an eclipse, and it's a full moon as well. So it's a full moon basically on steroids, like everybody says in social media astrology. Full moon on steroids. I've heard other people talk about eclipses as some kind of cosmic chiropractor, like setting things straight and so. And I know that there's a huge what do you say? There's a lot of information also about eclipses and how eclipses perhaps bring out change in terms of for people of some kind of societal status, kings, world leaders, so to speak. But I'm not going to go into that in this video either, because that's also a whole other subject of itself, and we're going to try to keep this as practical as possible. So what can we read from this full moon or lunar eclipse? First of all, we have to acknowledge that this is a lunation, a full moon in the sign of Libra. And this is because, of course, the moon is in opposition to the sun in Aries, 5 degrees of Aries. So with this being said, we can already begin by saying that, okay, there's a flavor of tension here, right? Full moon is like the final stage, the final lunar phase. It is some kind of tension. It's a culmination of energies. I'd like to talk about also the opposition, that aspect, and paint the picture of two people before like a boxing match or an MMA match or whatever you want to, what kind of example you want to take. But like when you put two people in front of each other, that kind of tension at the stare down, that's a little bit what we're dealing with here. So something is going to go down, right? And we're going to have a winner. Something is going to happen. Yes. What's interesting and also important to mention when I talk about this is that even though we have an opposition and a culmination and like a bit of a tense situation going on, which is also extra tense because of the eclipse, it's important to say that with all opposing signs, there's not only tension, there's also some kind of, mutual understanding here. In the sense that just as we have two boxers facing each other at the beginning of a boxing match or a stare down, I mean, they have been matched, right? You would not put one that is substantially weaker than the other. No, some kind of matching has been made beforehand, and they're supposed to also have some kind of, there's challenge here. They are equipped and they are they can challenge each other and have a good match. We have to remember that, because that's very important, because as we also talk about these little thingies, the nodes, the lunar nodes, the south node, which I'm pointing at now, and the north node, which I'm pointing at now, which are points. They're not actual planets or anything. They're just more calculated points, marking some sort of, or coming with the interpretation that, okay, the south node, this one, is more related to where do we come from, or what do we need to sort of let go of, in a sense, to move towards the north node, where we're headed. And we can talk about this also in so many different ways, karma or whatever, past life experiences, but I'm just going to talk more about it as what we already know and what we can integrate and have another look upon while defining a mission statement or a purpose, or like, where are we headed? I'm going to keep it simple like that. So yeah, the nodes also. So we have that polarity, and why I bring this up is because they're important for an eclipse, but it's also what I referred to before, that we have the polarity here, the opposition between sun and moon, and it's not only bad or not only tense, because we can learn a lot also. We can learn so much by integrating where did we come from, what do we bring to the table, and what do we want to make of it now? What can we develop to balance these energies, because they do balance each other. There is that kind of relationship going on. And lastly, before we dig in more into the interpretation, the moon, the lunation here, the full moon in Libra, is very, symbolic for justice. It's very symbolic also for harmony, balance, right? Social justice in a sense, and harmonizing. It's like a culmination process. But what comes to my mind is a lot in regards on a collective level, justice, of course, but also harmony. What does harmony mean? And how can we reflect upon harmony during this time? And what does it take to create more harmony? And what do we need to integrate? But let me come to that. First of all, like I said, moon in Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus. Where do we have Venus? Yes, here. Okay. Venus is in Pisces next to Saturn. It's it's a separating aspect, so we're leaving this theme of perhaps make use of what we value, or understanding how structure is important to create harmony, structure, Saturn, Venus harmony. But what is important here is that, okay, Venus is extremely strong in the sign of Pisces. Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces, meaning that, okay, Venus in Pisces is like we're one. Like in terms of harmony, we are one with all. Remember what I said about the sign of Pisces in the beginning of this video, the Buddha feeling like one with the universe. Venus ruling harmony, ruling values, ruling also, worth, for example, and romance and relationships. Okay, in Pisces, there is a flavor here of being one with all, feeling the harmony through everything, through a connection to the universe as a whole, looking into the eyes of a person passing you in the street and be like, I'm another you. It's that kind of vibe going on here. So that's important to mention. And if we just look at where Mars is, because Mars rules the sun, right? The sun, or doesn't rule the sun, but I mean, this is how we work with astrology. The sun is in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars. Okay, where's Mars? Where do the energies flow? So we have Mars in Pisces, bringing out some sort of action, engagement, some kind of power, strive, energy related to this concept of being one with all, spirituality, romance, like universal love, Piscean themes here. So we're not going to complicate it, like I said, but we are going to look at what this eclipse might bring, or how we can understand it more practically in our lives. So this polarity between Aries, the sun in Aries, and the moon in Libra. The sun in Aries is like, it's when I think about sun in Aries, I think about, okay, conscious pursuits, sun ruling like more conscious pursuits, because sun is the luminary that gives light to everything. So it's more visible in that sense. Okay. In polarity with the moon and the sign of Libra, it's like we're here to balance and perhaps, explore drastical change or somehow go through this cosmic chiropractic session in terms of I am versus I balance, which are the key phrases for these two signs. I am Aries, I balance Libra. So what comes to my mind here, and also in regards to perhaps letting go of something related to the archetype of Libra is, okay, all these discussions about be self-reliant, turn off your TV, think about yourself, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's a lot of that talk going on if we look at, for example, social media and the, New Age movement. And I think we have to be a little bit mindful here and find a balance, because there are some voices that might say, no, we need to only think about the collective. We need to create harmony through others. We need to, you know, relate to others. Those are very Libran themes. While the counterpart would say, no, think about yourself. You are the universe. You are the most important person in your life. But here we are being shown that they are sort of, they are in polarity, but they also share common themes. Because if we think about this real good, there's a shadow side to the sign of Aries, and the shadow side I would like to call or name as hurry up and be selfish. Just like there's a shadow side to the sign of Libra, which is more like, okay, I cannot make decisions for myself, perhaps. I devote all my time to creating harmony with others. I have a brother with a stellium in Libra, and yes, I know that sometimes a shadow of that can be to be a little bit indecisive, or to perhaps not put yourself first in that sense. So it's important here that these two archetypes, that we see how we can learn from these polarities and how we can learn by integrating them in ourselves and how we act. So how do we do that? Well, my suggestion is that I think this eclipse is going to bring some sort of ending in terms of when it comes to, okay, perhaps keeping quiet, not daring to speak or not daring to act in based on the idea that when we don't speak up, when we don't act out, then we create harmony with others. That kind of notion. Okay, when we rely on others, when we create harmony with others, when we relate to others, you know, all those kind of themes, then we create harmony. But that's not the case, because if we think about this real good, like if we were to see this as a phase of ending, which is a full moon, then perhaps this will open up a pathway to a new way of thinking that, okay, but what if we, by adhering to ourselves and by listening to ourselves, acting more upon our thoughts, or communicating our wants and needs and what we are and what we want to become or whatever, what about that? What about if that could foster harmony? And this is, I understand that this can be provoking to some, because this is like, this perhaps sounds like it mirrors the narrative of be selfish, think only about yourself. But that is not the case. Because as we see here with astrology, the ruler, both of the rulers of the sun, of the sign that the sun is in, Mars is in Pisces, just as the ruler of this lunation is here in Pisces as well. And we have a sextile here, a nice aspect between the ruler of the lunation and Jupiter in Taurus, meaning that by we can find great expansion in some way, in a very tangible way, and also in a way where we can come in contact with what is really important, what really matters in terms of stability, Taurus. So I really believe in this, that we can, for example, Yeah, just give me an example. Let me give you an example now so you understand what I'm talking about. I recently I have worked a lot on the theme of finding my own voice. And this is aligned with what we talked about before, Mercury being close to Chiron here, and we have the North Node here in Aries, pulling us all towards the direction of who are you? Who are we? Who am I? Who am I? And healing that narrative around who am I? And communicating through our actions also. So for me, on a personal level, this has meant that in terms of decision making, am I going to look outside of myself to make decisions? Or am I going to trust myself? That's one part of this. And this, we can break it down into a more like daily examples. Okay, my astrology business, for example. What do I want to do? Am I going to adjust or sort of rely on what do I think others want from me to create harmony? Am I going to lean towards that direction of I balance? I will balance. I will direct my energy so that I balance and harmonize with my surroundings to a greater extent. Or am I going to act upon who I am or based upon my idea of myself and sort of go that direction? And I've chosen to integrate these two, balance these two polarities in the sense that it is important to harmonize with others. We can never deny that. We can never deny that it is extremely important to have good relations to other people, to be social, to be in relation with others, to find that harmony and connection, which the archetype of Libra symbolizes. But in that process, doesn't it become more authentic if we do that from a point of, I would say, self-actualization? Doesn't it become more authentic that way? Doesn't it become more authentic if I dare, speaking of courage linked to Mars and Aries, if I dare to communicate what I want? Because you know what we are mistaken by here sometimes is perhaps that, okay, if I communicate what I want, then I'm selfish, like I mentioned before, the shadow side of Mars and hurry up and be selfish. But really, if we think about Piscean idealism or leading with your heart, one with the world, if we dare to be ourselves fully and unapologetically based on that value that we are one, there is room for everybody, there is love for everybody, there is no competition, we are one, I am another you. If we base our notion on that, and from there dare to act upon our own impulses, Aries, our own ideas, and really do what we think is right, then I think it's okay. And I want to say this because, like, to burst this bubble that acting upon your own needs or claiming your place or doing what you want is like selfish or sort of stands in opposition to, driving the progression forward in terms of creating a better society. Because I think that's where we are tricked, that because we look at the world leaders and we look at how people with this sort of self-actualized personality, how they come across, we look at them from that point of view. We have seen what kind of world has been created based on people claiming their place in the world. But what we have to remember again is Pluto is now in Aquarius, right? So it's a whole other era. The old structures of control, the Capricorn structures, Pluto in Capricorn, they're fading. They're fading away and will fade away even more as Pluto ingresses even further into Aquarius. So it's very important, like, lead with the heart. But how do we lead with the heart if we don't look in? If we don't ask ourselves, like, okay, but what do I think? What do I want? where am I going? How do we lead with the heart if we don't dare to go into that process? Because it's if we think about also what happened before the nodes, the south node and the north node, which are now in Libra and Aries, that polarity. Before we had these nodes in the Scorpio Taurus axis, and there we faced a lot of transformation, Scorpio, also in terms of our values, for example, but also like in terms of our possessions and having. And a lot of people have had to go through a process of transformation and still are, because we have had a lot of upheaval and drastic change in terms of our economy, our financial systems. With Uranus in Taurus, for example, we've had great changes there, and it's still changing. So we have been prepared for this process that we're going into now. Okay, if I manage to be safe despite the fact that I have like $10 left on my account or whatever, or if I can have gratitude for the fact that I do have a home. Maybe it's not a home that is like what you see in on social media or on Pinterest or whatever, or when you put on the Kardashians on the TV, but you have a stable home. The stability, what is important in terms of finding values that favor your stability. We were in that process, but now we're in the process of the Aries and Libra axis, which is like daring to assert oneself more, daring to rely less on others, Libra. So for me, this has meant, for example, that I mean, I've had a process where I was with a very close friend of mine, and she's very intuitive, and we had very many conversations where we would give each other advice based on like our intuition. She would message me and be like, oh, I have this work, this potential contract coming up, what do you sense about it? And we would like ask each other these kind of questions. And it just came to me the other day that now we are kind of done with that process. We've had great exchange from each other's insights, but now is the process of daring to make decisions based on yourself. And that is scary. That's scarier than what it sounds like. It actually is, because that means that we have to sort of be accountable, held accountable. But that's also where we need to remember that the healing of ourselves as a collective begins with each and every one of us. And daring to say, I am, I am, I don't mean that we should label each other. That's not what I'm saying. I just say, stand up instead of leaning back. Instead of saying, I think just the same as you. No, what do you say? Because that's how we create a progressive society. That's how we create a progressive society, according to me. And this is, of course, not a truth, absolute truth, or whatever. You take and take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And this is just one perspective out of all. But I think it's extremely important to find this, like, okay, what do I think? And bring that to the table. Because as we see, the structures are changing. The structures are the collective, is changing, and the progression is going to just come at us at much higher speed. So it's important to be like, okay, but what do I see here? What do I think? Who am I? Who am I in this? And that can change from day to day. I mean, nothing is static. Nothing is static. If there's anything we should bring with us in terms of learning from astrology, is that nothing is static. And so that's a little bit of insight for you all here, and I'm not going to get more into it. Just wanted to let you know. Dare to rely more on yourselves and leave what doesn't really resonate in terms of false harmony, or keeping certain social relationships or encounters just for the sake of keeping them. Because we need to dare to let go of certain things. And that doesn't mean that we cannot say hello again another time. Nothing is absolute. But dare to take a step. Dare to see your part in the world and see how that can create harmony on a higher level, to dare to let go of the other sort of thinking that adjustment equals harmony. Maybe it's the other way around. I'm going to leave you with that, so I'm not going to talk too much, but that was it basically. And yeah, I'm going to stop sharing also, and just say thank you for watching this video. And as always, I'm available for consultations and speaking events or whatever. I'm available, and you can find me on www.esotericadventures.com, on my Instagram, esoteric_adventures, or here on YouTube. So don't hesitate to reach out, and yeah, send me a message if there's anything you're thinking about. Have a great time ahead, and happy astrological new year!